Now, optimum ignition timing, right? We want our ignition timing to be as advanced as we possibly can to get best fuel economy, best power, best emissions. But if we go too far, we're going to end up causing engine damage. That's where our knock sensor comes into play, right? So how this actually operates, so we're going to advance our ignition timing until knock occurs. Once it sees knock occurring, it's going to take it a step back. It's going to constantly be on that wall of knock occurring. And it's going to learn this. Now there are some techs, there's a data PID called knock learn value. There are some techs who have a lot of good luck determining if you have fueling issues using knock learn value. Think about this, if you have bad gas, is it not gonna cause knocking issues? I've had mixed results with it. A lot of cars are somewhere like a typical knock learn value is between 10 and 15 degrees on a Toyota in your data PIDs. I've seen a lot where if you get into the 20s, you have bad gas. I've had mixed results with it, but it's something to keep in mind, something cool to look at if you think you have bad gas, you have a lean condition, you think you have bad gas, it might be something to take a peek at. Now, we don't look at knock at all times. We use a knock judgment zone right when ignition occurs. During the knock judgment zone is the only time we are looking for knock, the ECM is looking for knock. That way, if you have abnormal engine noise, think a water pump failing, which is pretty typical on a Toyota, an alternator causing noise, it's going to ignore that to not affect ignition timing as much. Now, 2010 RAV4, crank no start. I go out with a spark tester, I only get one spark occurring. What are you guys looking at? You have one spark occurring. Crank sensor, right? Verified, I only had one signal being sent out to IGT. Here's a known good waveform. You see 360 degrees of crank rotation in our crank waveform. This is the waveform that I got. Everyone here who uses an oscilloscope, this sticks out like a sore thumb, right? Have damage to our reluctor. Pulled out the crank sensor, used a borescope, you can see damage done to the reluctor. And I kept going. I thought that I could replace this reluctor. On this particular engine, it's part of the crankshaft that's pressed on. You cannot fix it. No, did not set a code. The engine had to be running for it to set a code. Yeah. Yep. The damage was caused by VVT gear that came apart. The VVT gear came apart for two reasons. One, because it's a Toyota VVT gear, and two, because lack of maintenance. You can see that oil is black. The kicker was, again, they needed at least a crankshaft, but because of the lack of maintenance, they ended up just getting a used engine. You know Toyota doesn't make reman engines, like a crate motor? Anyone realize that? Yeah, you can get a short block and you can get a bare head. You cannot get an assembled engine from Toyota. All right, so if one transistor fails, right? So you have IGF for all our ignition coils. So right here you should have one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here's a V6 engine, right? So when IGT triggers, we have no IGF operation. It determines that the ignition coil is not, or thinks the ignition coil is not firing. It's going to shut off our fuel injector, right? Fuel injector is down here in blue. But what happens when you go to Amazon and buy an ignition coil for 20 bucks? That ignition coil shorts out. It shorts the entire circuit. The ECM thinks no ignition coils are firing. Guess what it does to your fuel injectors? Shuts them all off. So this is a start-stall operation. It's going to feel like an immobilizer fault. It's going to allow you to start the vehicle. It will run for a second or two and then just die out. You put a Noid light on your injectors, you're going to see them shut off. You will still have spark. The easiest way to diagnose this is just going around connecting each ignition coil until you get your 5 volts back. Once your voltage jumps back up to 5 volts, you know you just unplugged the shorted ignition coil. Or you could just look for some off-brand ignition coil from Amazon, and you'll probably hit it every time. What I can tell you is it uses a planetary gear set to drive the intake cam, and it can be driven either by the timing control motor or the timing chain, depending on which one is spinning faster. And it does it through the planetary gear set, all right? So if the motor is spinning faster than the timing chain or the valve train assembly, it is going to advance our intake valve timing. If they're both spinning at the same time, it will hold that valve timing. And if the motor is spinning at a slower speed than the valve train, it is going to retard our intake valve timing, all right? Does this all through a 3-phase motor, all right, that has rotation sensors. So you have EDT1 coming from the ECM that tells the EDU what speed and rotation to spin the motor. Coming back, we have some nice signals that we did not have before on our VVT-i and dual VVT-i setup. We have data being sent back for actual motor speed, motor direction, and a diagnostic signal. All right, VVT-iW is more of like a new European variable valve timing design. We just sat in, anyone take Justin Morgan's BMW class yesterday? It's a good class. I love Justin Morgan. He did a lot with variable valve timing while I was sitting in there, and it's a very similar setup to what Toyota is now using. But the VVT-iW is just a wider range of hydraulic valve angle adjustment. Notice that bolt that Justin was talking about. That bolt is the 3-way valve, just like on a BMW engine.